I am coming again to Les Suicides of Emile Durkheim. But since some of you may have forgotten, I will begin with the last paragraph of my last technical lecture on Emile Durkheim. In between, I gave sociology of translation, how the worldly powers decide which book will be published or which book will be translated, which book will be banned, and when the ban will be uplifted. Now let us come to Emile Durkheim's concept of suicide. Now, as I said earlier, all concepts of Durkheim are interrelated. All concepts of Durkheim are interrelated from the very beginning. But when he started revising his views, he did not revise only the division of labor in society. Rather, he revised all his books under the light of criticism, which he had received in fellow reviewed journals, and also the criticism by the opponents, which others could have avoided, but Durkheim took into account and revised his position. Therefore, please remember, when you have to answer the end semester questions, you have to rely more and more on the class lectures, because you cannot answer any question only on the basis of one book written by Durkheim. All his books are interrelated, and there is no point in which any book can be singled out as independent book. Okay. Then in the last class I said that crime rate and legal codes in both organic and mechanical solidarities are social or moral facts, which are the expression or symbolic representation of normal and pathological condition of the social solidarities. Now the question which some of you may ask is, why I insist on social solidarity and not on society? The reason is very clear once you compare and contrast Emile Durkheim on the one hand and Karl Marx, Max Weber and their interpreters on the other hand. Then society as a concept in the English language becomes problematic. It is not clear whether they are referring to the civil society or they are referring to the citizens of the nation state. Now, I told you that Durkheimian term social solidarity can be compared with the concept of civilization in Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher, or the early socialists like Auguste Comte and Herbert Spencer. And Durkheimian solidarities include four elements. and these are military establishment, the executive government of the state, the market, and the civil society. Therefore, social solidarity is a technical term in sociology which covers four: the nation state, the military establishment, the civil society, and the market. The suicide rate, in the same sense, is a social or moral fact which cannot be understood properly by utilitarians like Max Weber and socialists like Karl Marx. Now let us come to the book proper, and I am using the second edition. Which was published in 1951, and it was again revised. The translation was revised in 1979. Therefore, I am using Les Suicides, published in 1897 in French language, which was for the first time translated into 1951 after the high priest Talcott Parsons made it in his own way redundant after publishing the social system, and then it was revised in 1979. I do think Parsons was wrong. He said that once he moved from the structure of social action, where he synthesized Emile Durkheim and Max Weber, to a higher synthesis of cybernetics and Emile Durkheim in the new book called The Social System. I think his anticipation, his hypothesis was not verified by the fact. And I have referred to some of those facts during the last three lectures last week. Okay, now in this book, Emile Durkheim emphasized emphatically that the life of region or a rationality, the life of region or a rationality in social solidarity is itself a moral commitment. This is a quotation. The life of region or a rationality in social solidarity is itself a moral commitment. Now, what he means? He means a very simple thing, that whether it is friendship or enmity, competition or conflict, it cannot become meaningful unless and until there is a moral consensus about the language which is being used. For example, in case two teams are playing a test match or two countries are fighting a hot war, how you are going to make sense of the victory or the defeat unless and until both the competitors or both the fighting countries share the same language of victory and defeat. Therefore, there has to be a moral commitment about the meaning of victory or the meaning of defeat, even if two people are fighting a hot war. What does it mean? It means that although rival theories claim that they can explain social solidarity without using the concepts of Immanuel Durkheim, none of the theories have successfully validated their claim by explaining the historical events during their time or after their time. In other words, although in theory courses many theories are taught, but all theories of sociology are dependent upon the technical terms refined by Immanuel Durkheim. In other words, Durkheimian theory of social solidarity is set apart from all other theories of society, state, market, or the military. Okay, now let us come to suicide. George Simpson writes in the preface to the second edition of the English translation, though our statistical material is more refined and broader, and our socio-psychological apparatus better established than was Durkheim's, his work on suicide remains the prototype of systematic, rigorous, and unrelenting attack on the subject with the data, techniques, and accumulated knowledge available at any given period. Indeed, lay suicide is among the very first modern examples of consistent and organized use of a statistical method in social investigation. In this book, I am showing it again and again. Immanuel Durkheim tried to establish successfully that what looks like a highly individual and personal phenomena is explicable through the social structure and its ramifying functions. It is an outstanding book on the study of social causation, although there is a very dominant tendency in post-modern world or post-colonial world to avoid cause-effect relationship, and it is established in the hard sciences called physics, mathematics, chemistry, geology. Nonetheless, all rigorous scholars of life on earth and society, at least at the end of their life, accept that even to express or experience your freedom, you must follow the rules. Even if you want to experience your unrestrained freedom in your sense of the term, you have to follow the rules of society. In other words, sociology, as conceptualized by Emile Durkheim and demonstrated in his book Suicide, makes it clear that both freedom and destiny of European philosophy, European modern philosophy, are very childish propositions. Freedom and destiny, free will and destiny, these are polar opposites in Western modern philosophy, and Emile Durkheim thinks that this is a bogus claim. Because unless and until you follow your duty, there is no right for you. As Theodor Adorno of Critical School of Germany and a very noted theorist of culture said, even to criticize tradition, you should be rooted in tradition. Even to criticize tradition, you should be rooted in tradition. Otherwise, your opponents will just tell you you are not one of the human beings. In case you are not following the sacred language of your society, then you do what you are capable of doing. It will make no sense, no impact. As I said earlier, even to fight, you have to follow the language of moral consensus. Even to protest, you have to follow the language of moral consensus. Otherwise, the mighty power of the state or market will just dub you outsider, alien, anti-national, heretical, revisionist, and you are finished. Therefore, the human history says that even though Karl Marx may have very profound knowledge, but he had to migrate from Germany to France and then France to England. It was like Prophet Muhammad migrating from Makkah to Medina and then again from Medina to Makkah. This is what happened when Ayatollah Khomeini migrated from Raja Shah Pahlavi, Iran to France, and then from France to Iran. Therefore, in case you want to understand real empirical social facts around you, in your neighborhood, your village, your town, your community, your regional culture, your state, your global village, you have to make your identity special or unique within the cultural language, the moral language of society. Durkheim is saying the same thing in his own words. I am reading it again. Durkheim tried to establish successfully that what looks like a highly individual and personal phenomena is explicable through the social structure and its ramifying functions. Durkheim attempted to relate systems of thought to the states of the collective conscience involved in the currents of egoism, altruism, and anomie. Now, this book, Suicide of Emile Durkheim, talks about three types of suicide rates: egoistic suicide, altruistic suicide, and anemic suicide. And I'm just trying to paraphrase Emile Durkheim in very simple language with the help of the revised edition, the revised second edition of the book in English, that Emile Durkheim attempted to relate systems of thought to states of the collective conscience involved in the currents of egoism, altruism, and anomie. It is the beginning or the starting point in sociology of knowledge, which was later developed in primitive classification and the elementary forms of religious life, etc. etc. means other books not very popular or other articles not easily available in the English language. Finally, lay suicide shows Durkheim's fundamental principles of social interpretation in action. Finally, lay suicide showed Durkheim's fundamental principles of social interpretation in action. His social realism. What is his social realism? His social realism is to see society as an entity greater than the sum total of its parts, with its accompanying concepts of collective representations and collective conscience. In case some of you are making notes, I will repeat. Durkheimian social realism sees society as an entity greater than the sum total of its parts, with its accompanying concepts of collective representations and collective conscience. Now, Durkheim's social realism is here, that is in the book Les Suicides, applied to a special problem area, and the results are some of the richest it has ever borne in sociological research. In the study of suicide, Durkheim tested methodological and heuristical principles. In the study of suicide, Durkheim tested methodological and heuristical principles he developed in the first two books, that is the division of labor in society and the rules of sociological method. Durkheim saw scientific, by scientific he meant sociological. For Durkheim, sociology is a hard science. He does not say like Auguste Comte that it is more technical and more hard than physics, mathematics or biology, but he is not ready to accept that sociology is not a hard science, at least like physics. Durkheim saw scientific endeavor as a great collective understanding whose findings are handed on from generation to generation and improved upon in the process. Now what he is trying to say? He is trying to say that what is considered as culture or tradition or matribhasha or mother tongue or the lingua franca is not something which is an object of fashion, which is an object of accidents, historical accidents. Rather, he is trying to say that the transfer of culture, tradition, technology or language from one generation to the other generation is a scientific endeavor of the concerned social solidarity. It was this vision of Emile Durkheim which inspired Bronisław Malinowski to write a book, The Scientific Study of Culture. This book of Malinowski became very influential in India, particularly in three universities. Lucknow University, represented by D.N. Majumdar, Institute of Economic Growth and Contributions to Indian Sociology, the journal, which came from Paris to New Delhi, represented by T.N. Madan. But it was also influential to Delhi School of Economics through the writings of J.P.S. Uberoy, M.S.A. Rao and Veena Das. Therefore, said birth cycle rituals. In other words, even in the most underdeveloped tribal societies of Africa, Latin America, Australia, or northeast of India, or anywhere in the world except perhaps the Middle East, the process of socialization is as scientific as it is in the most developed countries of the modern world. And here I am not borrowing from Claude Lévi-Strauss, here I am directly borrowing from Emile Durkheim's this passage. In The Savage Mind, Lévi-Strauss elaborated this concept of Durkheim. In The Scientific Study of Culture, Bronislaw Malinowski elaborated it in his own way. Clifford Geertz interpreted it in his celebrated book on culture. But the foundation remains the same, this paragraph of Emile Durkheim. And I am reading it for the fourth time. Durkheim saw scientific endeavor of members of social solidarity as a great collective understanding whose findings are handed on from generation to generation and improved upon in the process. Now, my dear friends, there is a Marxist anthropologist, Maurice Godelier. And there is an Indian Westologist, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who are talking in the same language. Now you can give benefit of doubt to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi that he may not have read Emile Durkheim, although Emile Durkheim died in 1917 and Gandhi was much influenced by European thought. Therefore, I doubt he was unaware that Durkheim wrote it. What Gandhi said when the British were not ready to give independence or liberation to India, the British said, the moment we withdraw from the Indian subcontinent or the Akhand Bharat, India will undergo chaos. What they implied? They implied that only European countries, only developed European countries have power to theorize. Only they have power to civilize. Others are savages and barbarians. This is also the logic of the capitalist class, which claims that once they lose their control over the means of production, the laborers will not be able to maintain the size and the pace of development which requires a higher level of management of resources and services. Now, Karl Marx said, and Maurice Godelier elaborated, you do not worry about, sir. You do not worry about that, sir. Laborers will devise their own ways to organize their production efficiently, and we have seen that in two most backward countries, namely Russia and China, from European point of view, they were backward countries. Communism or socialism came in under Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong. What does it mean? It means the same thing which Durkheim is trying to say. Maybe the Calvinists like Max Weber, maybe the colonists of Spain, Portugal, England or France or Netherlands are more efficient in their management of resources, but the people of the colony are not devoid of wisdom or theory building, that once they are free, their country will necessarily go to chaos. Now I know that some people will say that then why communist state disintegrated in 1991, or why China embraced to a state capitalism around 1989? My answer will be, then you can also say that there was so much bloodshed after India became independent. That these three examples, disintegration of Soviet Union, or bloodshed after, or massive riots after Indian independence, or massive massacre during Chinese Cultural Revolution, falsified Durkheim's view? I will say no. Rather it reaffirms Durkheimian view. How? Now, in this paragraph of Emile Durkheim, or in his whole, sociological, writings, it is very clear that no individual had more wisdom than the collective wisdom. No individual had more wisdom than the collective wisdom. Even charismatic authorities are charismatic within the cultural context of their cultural milieu. Today you are reading news after news that Joe Biden is claiming that Vladimir Putin tried to spoil the chance of Joe Biden in favor of Donald Trump, and there was a huge uproar when, against the popular expectation, Hillary Clinton was defeated by Donald Trump. I'm just trying to say that if Russia is capable of monitoring or modifying the collective representation of the most important military power on earth, namely United States of America, then it is also possible that disintegration of Soviet Union was not due to the internal contradiction. It was disintegration from outside. The pull factor and the push factor of political economy reaffirm dialectics of thesis, antithesis and synthesis of Hegel and early Marx, but they do not contradict the Durkheimian social realism that the whole is more than the sum total of individual parts. What does it mean? It means that individuals have usually secondary roles in constructions, but they have a more successful role as destructors. Why? Because in society there are normal times and pathological times. What are pathological times? Pathological times are the times which are dominated by enemy. Pathological times are the times which are dominated by social alienation. Pathological times are those times where the suicide rate is higher. Pathological times are those times where psychosomatic disease increase at unprecedented rate. Now, under the light of these insights provided by Durkheim, the known history of the last 500 years can be explained beautifully by following social realism of Emile Durkheim and his methodology, his techniques and his theories of social solidarity. Now, what Durkheim says about suicide in particular, please make a note. Durkheim said that etiology of suicide, A-E-T-I-O, etiology, L-O-G-Y, etiology of suicide is much more important than the individual cases of suicide. Now, what he means by etiology? Interconnectedness of suicide with social and natural phenomena. What is etiology of suicide? It is interconnectedness of suicide as social fact, and in that case, as Durkheim said again and again, empirically suicide is an individual case. Empirically, suicide is an empirical case, but a constant rate of suicide in a particular solidarity is a social fact. Therefore, there is no theory of suicide in Durkheim, rather, there is a theory of suicide rate in social solidarity. And here, Durkheim is trying to say that etiology of suicide is more important than the individual cases of suicide. What he means by etiology? interconnectedness of suicide with social and natural phenomena, with normal and abnormal psychology, with social psychology, with anthropology of race, with meteorological factor, with other cosmic factors like religion, with marriage, with the family, with divorce, with primitive rights, RITS, with customs, with social and economic crises, with crimes and homicide, with law and jurisprudence, with history, with education, with occupational groups. Now he said, suicide which appears to be a phenomena or phenomenon, phenomena is plural, phenomenon is singular. Suicide which appears to be a phenomena relating to the individual is actually etiologically with reference to the social structure and its ramifying functions. This book was written as a negation of the social theory of French anthropologist and thinker Gabriel Tarde, Tarde. Now very quickly I will read 3 points. Please make a note. Number 1, the suicide rate is a phenomenon sui generis, that is, the totality of suicides in a society is a fact, separate, distinct, and capable of a study in its own terms. I am repeating, suicide rate is a phenomenon sui generis, that is, the totality of suicides in a society is a fact, separate, distinct, and capable of a study in its own terms. Second, suicide cannot be explained by the individual forms, and since the suicide rate is for him a distinct phenomenon in its own right, Durkheim proceeds to relate currents of suicide in social concomitants. Third, social concomitants of suicide in its proper etiological setting is the chief objective determinants of Durkheimian theory of suicide rate. I am repeating, social concomitants of suicide in its proper etiological setting is the chief objective determinants of Durkheimian theory of suicide rate. Now, the first etiology of suicide he gives is that of egoistic suicide. Durkheim says that egoistic suicide results from lack of integration of the individual into society. Egoistic suicide results from lack of integration of the individual into society. The stronger the forces throwing the individual onto his own resources, the greater the suicide rate in the society in which this occurs. I will stop here because some of you are reporting about your technical problems of your connectivity, your networks. But please do not worry. I am recording my lectures and it will be uploaded on YouTube sufficiently before your end semester exam. Do not worry about the technical hitch of internet and online teaching. Thank you.